Welcome to the Value in Care webinar. It's an introduction to our costing toolkit. So firstly, about us. Value in Care were established in 2006. We've developed robust processes for collecting, analysing and verifying and storing cost data. We've used this data over the years to construct a range of cost models that calculate value for money rates for care services. So depending on what the type of care is, where it's located, the size of the home, or the number of care hours being delivered in a community-based setting, we have cost models that define what we believe is value for money. Our models include all costs the provider incurs for delivering a service, plus a percentage allowance for capital and operating profit. So about the tool you're going to see today. A tool to be used by a practitioner to inform them about the value for money price they should expect to pay for a service. They can either select the service and have a quoted price ready, so they know the service that they've identified and they've got a quote, or they've got the patient or service user in mind and they want to understand what the actual service levels will look like and then the price they should expect to pay. The tool is available to be used across health and social care. This demo version is currently mapped for a continuing healthcare service, and we are looking for a development partner to enable some help with defining what the service levels should look like within the models and also to ensure we've got the right terminology. Okay, so before we actually get into look at the solution, I just ask you to cover the following housekeeping. To make sure you get the best conditions for the meeting, please make sure your microphone and your video functions are disabled. There's a meeting toolbar at the top of the screen. It's green. If you hover over that, you should see the toolbar appear. If you click on participants and then you should see your name in the list. Your video should be grey. It shouldn't be highlighted green. If it is, everyone can see you. So if you just click on that and then turn that off, and also make sure that your microphone is muted. That ensures that nobody's talking over each other throughout the session. If you do have a question, again, go to the top of the screen and highlight that toolbar, select chat, and you can then type in any questions as they come up. And if you address that to everybody, everyone can then see the question. And then when we start to respond to the question, it makes sense to everybody because they know what's been asked. Okay, also make sure that you have put the screen to full size. And again, you can see that at the top of the screen. If you just hover over the toolbar, it will tell you how to do that. Okay, so let's start by giving you an overview of the tool. So there are two ways of actually using the system, as I said before, and we're going to have a look at the first one now, which is the practitioner has a residential service in mind. They've spoken to the provider, they've got a copy of the rota, and they've got a quote. Okay, so I'm going to take us in now to what the solution looks like. So I'm going in as an end user. So this is the front screen. And you'll see it's tabulated. And as we complete each screen, it will move us along in the tab so we can see how we're progressing. So at the moment, we've only mapped in physical disabilities and mental health. I'm going to select physical disabilities. And we've got two types in, standard and dementia. System will ask you for a postcode of the service user and for an identifier. So I'm going to put in my name, my patient, and then their reference number. And that's an NHS reference number, and the system knows when you have enough digits that you'll see the continue button will come up, so it knows what to expect. Okay, as I said, this is a CHC solution, and therefore we've used the decision support tool bandings and map them in here. If you were using it for social care, then there's other eligibility criteria, such as your fair access to care services. But I'm actually going to go in and say for this particular patient, I want to record my decision support tool outcomes so that in the future when someone is looking at the services being commissioned by price, they'll have some way of looking to see how the price is connected to the CHC standings. Just going to go down through and make my selection. Okay, once I've done that, I can then click on continue. And you'll see that we've now moved from details to stitching, now we're into the care. So as I said, I'm going in, I've got a particular care home in mind, so I'm going to select a specific care home. And I'm going to search the database to see if the home that I'm looking for has already been entered. When we go live with a commissioning organisation, we can actually upload the resource directory and put in any home details that you've got available, which means that it will prevent your end users having to routinely go and add homes that they know that they're regularly selecting. Okay, when they add a home to the system, it will ask for the location of the home. I'm just going to overwrite this because I know that I want to use a specific postcode area where my service user is currently living and where they want the service to be. And my quoted fee, they've actually told me that I should expect to pay £1,000 a week for this particular service, which is provided across a 100-bedded home. Okay, so I'm going to click on continue. As I said before, I have the ability to add the staff rota in. I have spoken to the provider. They've told me how many staff are in, and this will actually give me a better, accurate view of the value for money, because it's actually comparing that to actual levels of staff that are employed by the provider. The system has default shift patterns, which you locally define when you actually do set up your cost models. This particular service user doesn't need any changes to that. I'm quite happy for them to have the standard shifts. But if I wanted to, I could actually move the shift patterns to say that my particular patient does have a longer day requirement or a shorter day requirement. Okay. So I'm going to, so I do know that nursing is required, and I do want to provide a staff rota. So I'm going to say that I know that a 100-bed unit, and the provider's told me there's 5 staff on during the day, and at night there's only 3, and senior care staff there's 1 and 1 at night as well. And I've got 1 nurse on in the day, 1 nurse on in the night, and I've got 3 HCAs. Okay, so it's building up a picture of the actual, as I say, the actual staffing levels that the provider is supplying. And actually, I don't need sleeping support. This is somebody who needs the same level of care during the day as during the night. So I'm going to, and what we have here is in the background of this tool, there are service levels defined for this type of service. So this is telling me how this home is comparing with the standard levels of service that we would expect somebody in a 100-bedded unit with this particular person's needs to have available. And actually you can see that they're not doing very well. There's not enough care staff hours. There is an additional 1 hour and 15 minutes of senior time, but they're failing. So this is also a good quality tool, because I can see that the model for this particular organisation says that there should be an expected level of care for the shared care, and this is evidencing that it's not meeting that. Anyway, I'm going to continue. For this particular person, they only require shared care support. They don't require any additional one-to-one. So I'm going to say actually no on this occasion. And when we come into the second demonstration that I'll give you, the more complicated case, we will start to look at that. But for this one, it's shared care only. They don't need any enhanced additional one-to-one hours. And I also want them to remain and take an equal share of the ancillary staff, so the cooks, the groundsmen, the domiciliary staff. This person has an equal share of those as well, so I'm not going to make any changes. But I am going to say that this particular home that I've been to see is next door to a home that is actually of a poorer quality. This home, the provider has spent a lot of time making sure that the quality standards are high, and that each room has en suite. So I'm going to stay here. Actually, I want that recognised. So yes, they've gone above and beyond. If I was filling this in and I wanted my patient to go into the one next door that hadn't actually made the modernisation, then I would have left it. And what the system's doing is it's adding an additional factor to allow for the fact that there's a better quality and the provider has actually spent more money in the upkeep. So I'm going to continue now. And I have the ability to say whether or not there's any specific equipment that would be required for this placement. So it's a piece of equipment that my patient would need, and I wouldn't ordinarily have expected my provider to have that available to the core. Actually, this is a nice simple case for me. No, my particular patient doesn't require any individual equipment. So I'm now at my summary screen, which gives me an opportunity to just look through and make sure I'm happy with all of my answers before I ask the system to do a value for money assessment for me. So yeah, I know the level of staff. I added my rotas. I also don't want to go and define any changes to the ancillary hours. This is a person that takes a share of all. So I actually now want the system to generate me a quote for the service based on my quote of £1,000. So I know I added £1,000 in, and what the system's told me is actually I'm in the red. The quote that I've been given does not offer value for money. And if I look down through here, it's telling me that actually, with the level of service that is required, I should only be expecting to pay £471.61 a week, not the £1,000 that I've been quoted. So what is then demonstrated below is a breakdown of that quote in comparison. But I'm actually not going to take you through that at this stage, because it's important that you understand how the model is made up. So I'm going to come back into our presentation here, and I'm going to ask Ray to talk us through the building of a cost model. So how do you go about actually building the cost model to have the data available? So the data coded into the tool is based on a local cost model that's been defined using local data supplied by the CQC registered providers and the Value in Care national data sets. The commissioning organisations can influence the model with locally defined costs. This enables organisations to set their own capital and operational profit margins and void levels. So what that all means is that, as I said when I started the presentation, Value in Care has been completing cost reviews for purchasing organisations for 10 years. And what we do is we go out to communicate with the providers that are registered as with the CQC and ask them to tell us about the actual cost of delivering the service. We need to make sure that the commissioning organisation has done a due diligence exercise to ensure that they really have given every provider an opportunity to tell them about their service and to understand if there are any reasons why costs in that particular location are higher than we would have expected. So we do the local cost survey. We then compare the local cost survey to the national data set that Value in Care have, and then we make recommendations for what the local cost model would look like. Now, within Value in Care's cost model, we do have, so there are operating costs that we would expect every provider to incur, but also the ability for commissioning organisations to actually set their own level of rental return and their own level of what they would expect to be operational profit. For Value in Care, the modelling that we do is that we actually look at the property value, and we also look at what the local housing allowance rental rates would be for a single room in an establishment, and that gives us the capital element of a cost model. So all of the costs incurred by a provider are included in the tool, and that generally is your establishment costs, your staffing costs. The service levels are important. What's the optimum level of service you would expect for any particular service type? And that can be the bandings that we find commonly used in our health customers. And as I said before, the capital and operational return, i.e. the profit level. So to help explain that in more detail, I'm actually going to take you back into the system. I'm actually going to log us in this time as a systems administrator, which is where you actually then start to see how the data is sitting behind. Okay. So each customer has their own systems administration account, and every time we implement the system into a new customer site, the value and care models are defaulted. But we work with you to make sure that there's any local requirements that needs to be factored in. So you'll see, again, it's a tabulated format, and the tabs allow us to record all of the cost elements that we would expect a provider to incur. So we have shift patterns, and you have shift patterns for each different service type. We know that younger adults that may be in a disability residential setting probably have longer days than if you've got older adults. They may have a shorter day and a longer evening. So it's important, but you've got all of your shift patterns here. But this can be better demonstrated if I take you in to the quote that we've just generated for our Sandy Thomas, and I'll show you then how all of the what the defaults are in the background. Okay, here's our quote again. This time we can see that the quoted fee was, as I said, £1,000, and the expected fee is 471. There's a variation of £578 in here. But then we can start to look down at the comparisons, and the comparisons are the cost model. So we've got staffing inputs. So the level of staff hours, so we've got 7 actual direct care hours from care staff, and we've got our senior care staff breakdowns, and it takes it down to what the ancillary staffing is as well. And then we've got enhanced, and I didn't add any additional one-to-one for this person, so that's all still at nil value. In the background, we know what the model says should be the rate of pay for care staff, senior care staff, nursing staff and HCA staff. Now again, we'll work with the commissioning organisation to define that, but from a value and care perspective, we have a database that's updated weekly that actually gives us the advertised rates that providers are advertising for staff, so we know what the current rates are. Okay, so then we then start to look at what are the costs that are relating to this package. So we've got here what the actual, so we know the staffing levels, and now we've got what the actual costs are. And then in the model, it says that we should expect these costs for one person sharing a 100-bedded unit. Okay, so again, all these are locally defined values that are in those tabs. Okay, and you can see it breaks it down onto a very detailed level. So food, utilities, the telephone, the insurances, all of the costs that you would typically expect a provider to incur. Some services may well have transport. So again, you might have in your model the allowance of transport costs, and you'll have your central management and your corporate. So you have your corporate overhead. So all this is taken from your actual model. So and the fee that we have is being compared with that. So the quote is being compared with the model values in there. The other thing that the system does is it will keep a yearly account of the models that you've been operating. So if someone is going to complete an annual review, you'll be able to see the difference in model price this year from last year, and that will help you when you're negotiating with your provider for your annual uplifts. Okay, so back into our PowerPoint again. So I'm now going to take us into the second method of using the system. And this is whereby the practitioner has a client or a patient and actually wants to start to build the service up. So they're actually building what the level of service is required for that person. And then the system will give them a cost or a price that they should be expecting to pay. So that when they go out looking for a service, they know that price in mind and are ready to have the discussions with the provider about what those costs should be looking like. So I'm going to go back into my practitioner view. I'm going to restart this, and you'll see. So although you'll see the same theme, you'll see where the slight changes are. So again, I'm going to stay with my my same client. So that's Sandy Thomas, and I'm going to. Sorry, that does help if you put the right. TW11 9AA. Here we go. I'm going to put Sandy in here. You'll see that it's got mandatory defaults that are being evidenced there as well. Put my number in. Okay, so that's my basic details of my patient. And I'm not going to record the CHC band this time. I'm going to say overall there it is a 5. I don't want to record my CHC outcomes. But I actually do this time. I don't have a specific care home in mind, so I'm going to just ask the system to give me a model price. Now, on this occasion, I'm going to say that actually I want a longer day. So I want a 20-hour day and a 4-hour night, so up for a very long time. And the system is only going to do this for one particular person. It's not going to change the model defaults. They're in the background and they're safe. But when I'm looking for a service for Sandy, on this occasion, I know that I'm actually looking for a long day. Okay, now I can also say to the system that I want to base the service on the ratio of staff to patients in the shared care. Or I can actually say what I know Sandy needs from the shared care staff that are on duty in the establishment. And the system has in the background, so part of the service levels, it has said what you would expect a person to receive as part of a shared care package. And again, although this list is extensive, it probably isn't reality, and that's why we're really looking for a development partner. We want something here that's much more meaningful when you're looking at shared care. But I'm going to say that that Sandy doesn't actually need any of these here, so I'm going to take those off. But I do want Sandy to have some help with getting in and out of bed in the morning. Let's just move this through. Okay, so getting in and out of bed. So actually, he requires, he does take a little bit of time. So I'm going to actually specify different values for Sandy. I'm going to say he needs 45 minutes. Okay, let's just copy that across. And he needs that in the weekends, and he needs the same level of time in the evening as well. So he's 45 minutes every time that he needs some help getting in and out of bed. Okay, and that is by care staff. And I can go down and I can use this list to be very specific. Now again, as I say, we know this isn't realistic, and you certainly wouldn't want to have practitioners having to go through a really, really long list like this every time they want to do a simple model calculation. So we think maybe 4 or 5 bands of shared care would actually build the picture of what the shared care hour should look like, but we're just actually just showing you here how that works. So because I've taken some of those costs away from the care staff, but I've added more, the system is calculating how this is now looking in comparison with the model service levels that are defined in the background. And then I can actually say, okay, how many care staff, what's the ratio of care staff that would actually look like for me? So if I then come up here, it's telling me that actually the ratios are 5 staff to 17 patients. But it's doing that work for me. Okay. I'll actually say we actually do want some default nursing care in there as well. Okay. So I'm now going to continue. And my patient this time actually does require additional tasks. So it's very important that they have a hydropool session. They need, so this hydropool is external, so it takes 60 minutes, and I need that 3 times a week. And it only takes one person to do that for me. It's actually care staff again that do that, and I want that to be done by weekly. Right, so 3 times a week for an hour, 1 care staff, and then the system works that out for me here, and you can see it's defined that as 3 hours. Do I want to adjust the timings for ancillary staffing? Well, I do actually, because Sandy is going to be helped to prepare his own meals. So therefore, I don't want I don't want the ancillary staff for preparing meals as part of his package. That's already, I've accounted for that additional 1 to 1 hour. So I don't want any preparation time for his meals. That's something that the care staff are going to be doing. So I can remove that. And then I'm going to continue. And again, as we said before, I actually know that Sandy won't thrive unless he's in a good quality environment and definitely needs en-suite facilities. So I'm going to make sure that both of those are selected as yes, and then I'm going to continue. Sandy does actually require a specific bath. He needs to be able to have a walk-in bath, which most providers won't have. So we will fund that to enable Sandy to thrive in a residential setting. So it's a walking bath. I know that we can get that sourced for £1,500, and I would expect that to last for at least 4 years. So I'm going to add that equipment. Okay. All right. So I've got a walk-in bath, and I've said I want that to be costed in over 4 years. So what that will do is it will break that down to a weekly fee. So it will take the £1,500 when I look at my value for money assessment, and it will say, well, actually, as a cost, a weekly cost, that's going to be £1,500 that's divided into 4 years. Okay. So what I've now got here is I can see my summary before I actually ask the system to give me a quote or evaluation. The actual summary of what the direct care hours and by staff type are. I can see so that's my shared care. I can see my definition of enhanced care, and also my ancillary hours are broken down. So that's my my levels of intervention. So now I'm actually very keen to see what price I should expect to pay for this service in that particular area where I've entered my postcode. And the system, you'll see this time I don't get a dial. It's got nothing to compare it to. I've not given it a price. I've just said, please, can you build up the price for the service that I've put in? And the complexity of this service has identified that actually I should be expecting to pay £1,089.54 per week for this particular place. And again, if you look down, the system has allocated a cost for each type of provision. It's identified a number for each cost heading that actually then gives me. So I'm now very informed, and I can go to look at the market to see what's available, and I can go to the market to see what's available, and I can have an informed discussion with the provider about the price I would expect to pay for that particular service. And again, if I take us back into the administration side and just refresh that for a moment, I should just ask it to give me the quotes again. Then the last service I put in there, which is for Sandy, Again, you've got no dial at the top, and that's why I know it's a model price. It tells me what I should be expecting to pay. And again, from a systems administration perspective, I've got an overview of all of the quotes that have been generated for my organisation, and there'll be a suite of reports that will be available both locally and for Value in Care. We'll have a suite of national reports where we can start to look at the different purchasing behaviours across each particular commissioning authority. So I'm now going to hand back over to Ray just to close the session for us. Okay, so just to summarise, Value in Care are looking for a development partner to help with defining the service levels and the system terminology. We know it's not right at the moment. As I say, we've got a very long list of tasks that are part of a shared care price, but actually we think that can be much smarter. So we're looking for some help for a development partner. And there will be a requirement for commissioning organisations to localise the Value in Care cost model that are provided as standard, so that you can avoid any judicial review. You can demonstrate that you have actually spoken and liaised with providers about what the actual costs of delivering care are to them, and that you factor that into your model. So, okay, we've now got one final opportunity for you to raise questions before we formally end. Okay, thank you very much for joining us today. That is the end of the session. We'll follow up with an email to ask for your feedback and also to see if anyone would be interested in, as I say, becoming our development partner. Thank you very much for your time.